بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على خير المرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome everyone to Zaytuna College. For those who haven't been here before, this is the first four-year Muslim liberal arts college. Been in existence for 3 years, and we already have 2 classes that are in, and we're accepting and getting the 3rd class of admitted students into the program. This is part of our continued engagement with broader intellectual currents and broader engagement with Islamic studies, legal reforms, issues relative to the Muslim world, as well as the Muslims here in the West, and thinking of the West broadly, meaning Europe as well as the United States. Zaytuna College is also part of the week of Islamophobia work or Islamophobia events at UC Berkeley, culminating in a conference on Islamophobia tomorrow, beginning tomorrow and Saturday. And our guest today, Professor Tariq Ramadan, gave a lecture yesterday at UC Berkeley and will be giving the opening lecture for the Islamophobia conference tomorrow before he heads out immediately afterward to the airport. So we're really very fortunate and glad to have him with us here at Zaytuna College. The lecture that he gave yesterday was about his new book that came out 2 years ago, Radical. Was it 2 years ago? 2010, was it? Or is it 2012? That was the publishing date. 2009, Radical Reform, Islamic Ethics and Liberation. And also he has a book that's is coming out, already came out in Europe, but it will be released in the US, The Arab Awakening, Islam and the New Middle East. So this book will be out in, I think, August, beginning of September in this country. So it will be important for you to pick it up on Amazon early on and see some of Tariq Ramadan's contribution in this area. Just a brief introduction to Professor Tariq Ramadan. He's a professor of contemporary Islamic studies at Oxford University, Oriental Institute at St. Anthony's College. Also, he teaches at Oxford Faculty of Theology. He's a visiting professor at the Faculty of Islamic Studies in Qatar, senior research fellow at Doshka, is it? Doshisha University of Kyoto, Japan, and Director of Research Center of Islamic Legislation and Ethics in Doha, Qatar, a center that just recently opened up. He holds an MA in Philosophy and French Literature and a PhD in Arabic and Islamic Studies from the University of Geneva. In Cairo, also, Cairo, Egypt, for those who have not lack of understanding of geography, we often comment that one way that we understand geography in the United States is by invading other countries. So I know that we're speaking to an audience that knows geography without that need. But in Cairo, in Egypt, Professor Ramadan received one-on-one intensive training in classical Islamic scholarship from Al-Azhar University scholars and received ijazas, which is a form of dispensation and certification for studying with Muslim authorities. Today, Tariq Ramadan would like to engage in a dialogue and a discussion rather than a formal lecture. And I know that we have many questions, both from those who attended yesterday's lecture and also some who came all the way from Santa Clara attending the Suhoor lecture, because we finished at 11 o'clock last night. So hopefully we'll have a rich dialogue, a rich discussion, both about his book on radical Islamic reform, as well as questions about Arab Awakening, and broadly also about Islamic education and where we're heading in terms of the critical issues that confront us. So it's a pleasure and honor for us to have Professor Tariq Ramadan with us. So I'll invite him to take the microphone.
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. So thank you once again. It's not the first time that I'm coming here, and the last time I think that we had already a discussion, and this is what I would like, is really to have time to listen to your questions, your comments on what you are experiencing. But we had a meeting over lunch with some of the brothers who are working in this, and I was asking about the project and asking about something which is, of course, dear to my heart, being, involved in within academia in the West, and thinking about your project and what you are trying to do here in this country, in California, in the United States of America, and also a pilot project, not only for you here, but for Western Muslims for now and the future. And I think that my starting point is really after this we can talk about whatever you want, because there are many fields that, as Dr. Hatim was mentioning, we talked yesterday about radical reform and this kind of relationship between Islamic legislation and ethics. We also yesterday spoke about a much more spiritual take on our understanding of our religion, knowing that at the same time we really have to connect this with our commitment within the society. And just now with Raman, we were talking, and he gave me just a book which is interesting about the Decolonizing academia. And I think that this is exactly the point where we should be all together. Is if we are serious about the way we get knowledge and we celebrate knowledge. And we also, I hope so, I hope that we understand what it means when we once again are always starting by saying the beginning of Islam is بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق, that we have to read in the name of God, and that it's all about knowledge, that it's a duty for any Muslim man and woman to seek knowledge. This is part of all what we are repeating. But there is one thing which is important. We are not worshipping knowledge, we are using knowledge to worship God. And it's always like this that we have to put things. We are not following scholars. The scholars are serving the community and should not be served by the community. And we have to keep the right thing here, is even in anything which has to do with our teachers should be means for us to come close to God, and our knowledge should be also means for us to serve Him better and to serve the society. So this is why there is something here which is, we need to put from the very beginning a substance which is a spiritual substance in what we know. And there are two things that are important, is what do we want to know? What are we going to do with what we know? But where does it come from? Anything that, or anyone who is telling you that knowledge is an objective field where there is no ideology is lying. Is lying. There is always, and even in the way you deal with, experimental sciences. So the starting point of you need, and this is why, in a book that is not really read by Muslims, because they think that there is not enough Islam in that book, because they read it superficially, the quest for meaning, developing a philosophy of pluralism. I'm saying that there is something that we need to get, is there are 4 disciplines that we have to be reconciled with. One of them is history. And when you come to the civilization, the Islamic civilization, you get something which is important. The driving force of people getting knowledge was by understanding the religion, saying, the way Allah is telling me to worship Him is to seek knowledge wherever I am. So there is an ethical duty to seek that knowledge. And saying something which is important, the more I know, the best I believe. So the more I know, the best I'm worshipping Him, because at the end of the day, Allahu A'lam, He knows best. But what I'm trying is to through my knowledge, to come close. So there is an ethical ground and a spiritual dimension. And this is why when we are talking with Imam Zaid Shakir and so many other brothers, you know, I'm not really much in all this business of, and we also had a discussion with one student right now, is, you know, Islamization of knowledge and this. I think that this, okay, we can talk about this, but much beyond this, upstream to the road that is leading us towards knowledge, I think that this is where, as Muslims, we have to come with an ethical ground, a spiritual ground, which is shaping an ideological understanding of the knowledge that we want. So to transform our knowledge into something which is only instrumental, and to make us believe that the instrumental dimension of knowledge is where you are really scientific, is in fact an ideological take. There is ideology in something which is science, is a closed field where you can get knowledge, use it, and you just add the ethical. There is something which is the paradigm of knowledge that we have to question. And I would say that if there is something that a Muslim college should do, being in the United States of America, is really questioning that. And questioning that is to really reconcile the spiritual take of what we are trying to achieve as human beings, and as we are trying to achieve this as human beings, in which way we are going to use the knowledge that we can get in order to achieve what we have to do as human beings. So in fact, the way we can Islamize knowledge is the way we can humanize knowledge for the sake of the ethical ground. And to accept that there is nothing which is beyond this humanity that we are sharing. And for us, this is فِطْرَةَ اللَّهِ الَّتِي فَطَرَ النَّاسَ عَلَيْهَا, which is really this yearning and this kind of understanding in which way we have to be connected with Him. So to get that knowledge and to think about it, it's something which is, you know, one of the main problems that we can have, you can see here how ideological it is. That very often what I'm saying here, it's perceived in many Western universities as not academic. It's spiritual, it's religious, it's subjective. So it's outside. And this kind of subjectivity, when you put it outside, it means that you are dividing between objectivity and subjectivity on ideological ground. That you decide there is a divide here, that this is, and who decides this? Who is deciding that this is objective and this is not? And that is going to be used with, you know, rational term, as if rational terms could be void from any specific ideology. I think we have to be critical on this, and you have yourself inductively to come to question this. And this is what I would expect a Muslim college to do, not only to destroy, but to be constructive in reshaping an identity for knowledge, a knowledgeable identity, an identity for knowledge, which is building, shaping, something which is a system, a paradigm, which is known in anything which has to do with science, with epistemology. Epistemology here is this philosophy of science is what you have behind the scene. And you have to talk about this. And as Muslims, and as students, and as American citizens, you need to have all these together. And to question the divide between what is objective and what is not, what is academic and what is not. I'm sorry, subjectivity is a very important academic topic. It is, and it was done in something which is critical, you know, when it comes to sociology and what we have, for example, with Edward Said when he was talking about Orientalism. But we have to break in very deep, because even Edward Said, in the way he's talking about Islam, he himself is trapped in what he's criticizing. If you are right and you go to listen to who he's talking to, when he talks about the other that are perceived by the West as the other, he himself chooses as the other of the other people that from within we consider as others. They're not talking from within. So he might not have been equipped from within the Muslim tradition. And when he was asked about this, he said, I don't care about what is said by the other. I'm critical of what is said by the West about the other. So there is one link which is missing here, one dimension which is missing. Even though, once again, I am really very much appreciative of what he has been doing. This is very important, but we also have to know what was missing in the whole thing. So this is why I think what we call from an Islamic viewpoint, but we have to be very deep in our understanding and definition of the spiritual dimension, which is the meaning that we give to this knowledge, the purposes, the goals, what we are trying to get out of it. This is something that we have to talk about, and we have to be critical when we are shaping something which is a curriculum for you to be equipped to live within this society, questioning the framework and questioning the hierarchy of knowledges that we have in the country, and the objectives, the goal, the meanings. And at the same time, as we were talking about, it's quite important to be mastering as much as possible the tools that are provided by a society. And you were talking to Raman, was telling me about decolonizing. You know, anything which has to do with decolonizing means that you need to get right the center of powers and knowledge is power in the universe of reference that we are dealing with. So you need to get this in order to know how you are going yourself to empower your own understanding as Muslims. And empower the Muslim understanding and the Muslim knowledge in this country is the way to help the Muslims to be autonomous, to get this independence, and not to be intellectually colonized. Because many Western Muslims are politically independent, intellectually colonized, even in the way they deal with the Islamic knowledge, even in the way. So how do you free yourself, this intellectual liberation, which is in fact the intellectual revolution in the literal meaning, the sense of the word, revolution, when you change your perspective. And I would say this is where a Muslim college should ask itself, what is my objectives? And any student should ask himself or herself, what is my role in this society? Is it to be equipped as they are equipped to do, as they are doing, or is it to question the viewpoint in order to question the very essence of this knowledge and to question it from within? And the only people who are equipped are the people who live here, who are within, and it's you. This is why you have a great deal of, it's a great deal of responsibility, because you can't say that you are prevented from doing the job. That's not true. You have all what you need here. It's a project, it's a process, 1 year, 2 years. This is the 3rd year. You still have 10 years to go. And not only 10 years to go, but even if you are going to be, getting your degrees and PhDs and master, whatever, you will never end the process. You are always in danger of being colonized. And you are always facing the necessity to free yourself and to question this. So this is where always connect spirituality and knowledge, heart and mind. Always try to get it in a comprehensive way, which is how do we connect the two dimensions. I don't know, this was an introduction, inshallah. Okay, let us have a discussion and whatever you want to say or by the way, it's not questions and answers, it's really a discussion. Okay, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum. I haven't read your book yet on the quest for meaning. I want to, one question I have as a philosophy major myself, I always get in debate with Muslim brothers about the place of use of reason and logic in Islam. Where do we place it? How much value do we give to logic and how much reasoning, and how much value do we give to religious text? Because usually when I start talking to them, they say, yeah, oh, you're giving too much value to logic than Islam kind of thing. But in other hand, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself uses logic in the Quran to make us believe in his creation and his existence. So where is the place of logic in Islam?
Can I ask you a question before trying to answer?
Sure.
Why in which way do you don't feel good when some people are saying, be cautious with rationality and logic?
I understand that rationality has its limits at a certain point. But on the other hand, we can't say logic is just arbitrary, but religion is more important, because religion itself has to use rationality to prove its own like cogency. You know, the religion, in order for religion to make sense, it has to use logic. But for you to say, for someone to say logic is not necessary or logic does not have any value, it's kind of like self-contradicting themselves.
Yeah. Yes, I agree with that. You know, one of the goals that I would set for such an institution like this one is to reconcile the Muslims with confidence and rationality, and confidence in rationality, which for me it's critical. That, you know, you start questioning the rational conclusions and rationality and the autonomy of reason, for example, that was so central in the Kant philosophy, saying, you know, this is where we need to have the critique of the practical reason, and saying that this is where we have to put reason and to separate reason for any other references. If you look at, and this is why we always need to connect our relationship to knowledge with our relationship with two other dimensions. The first is with history, and then power. And it's strange, but it's so true. With history, the Muslim civilizations, this Islamic civilization, the Muslims were not scared of reason when they were feeling, it was not always the case, but feeling in a position of power and domination, that they were confident with their universe of reference, so rationality was not a problem. When they started to get, and it came also from Muslim scholars, not only, you know, power, but Muslim scholars, they had the impression that the Greek logic, the Greek philosophy was entering by different trends within the Islamic reference or universe of references, as if this was undermining, in fact, the essence, exactly what I was saying just before, the paradigm, the connection between meaning and rationality, and this understanding that when they had the impression that this power struggle was not in their favor, they started to say we have to resist rationality and philosophy. While anything in the Islamic tradition and in Islamic sciences and Islamic, what we call sacred sciences, but even when it comes to the legal tradition, if you read Ash-Shatibi, for example, what he is producing is a philosophy of law. It's a philosophy. It's really a system. It's how, and this is coming from a human agency. It's not coming. He didn't find this in the book. And Al-Juwayni and they didn't find this in books. They were creative and trying to set a framework. And this is where now what we have to do, I would say, is in our understanding of this rationality and to reconcile ourselves with rationality doesn't mean that we accept in a so easy way something which is a paradigm which is secularizing rationality, as if meaning and objectivity when it comes to reason are to be separated. So I think that this is also something that is coming from very far. We did the same with politics, and we are doing the same with rationality, and telling us in pure rationality there is no ideology, and sciences, and though we deal with sciences and experimental sciences, is just to let the people be autonomous, and that's fine. You can you can get the knowledge of the object that you are studying, but at the end of the day, there is a mediation to your own perception of the world, your view, your world perception. By definition, knowledge is going to go through your world perception. It's not something which is outside. It has to have to do with this. And this is where we should reconcile ourselves with this understanding that our spirituality, our ethics, the objectives that we want for science are strong enough to trust our rational or rationality or human rationality and human agency, in order to make it clear, it's not, you are not more faithful to Allah when you are less rational and more believer. You are more faithful to Allah when you are as believer and as rational in the way, and you give meaning and goals and objectives to the use of your rationality. So it's not less rationality means more spirituality, is more rationality reconciled with ends, goals, ethics, that is making us, and it's the same, it's making us more faithful to the Islamic tradition. And you know who had this intuition was Abu Hamid al-Ghazali. Abu Hamid al-Ghazali had this intuition, and he was himself, you know, he came before Descartes saying that doubt is a rational process, and he responded already from our side as a Muslims to this rationalism that came from the 17th century by saying, but there is a light that is coming from your belief, that it's coming from your faith, min al-iman, that is directing your rationality. And this is exactly the kind of critique that we can have in our discussion with not the West, and by the way, not all in the West have this. If only we were studying more the Jewish tradition, you would understand that they said exactly the same as sometimes we said. In Andalusia, Maimonides was questioning the same pattern was questioned. And I would say that for us, in our relationship with philosophy, we have to take this. We have to get at that point of understanding, to say, reconciling ourselves with this and this relationship between the meaning, between something which is, okay, we acknowledge the fact that we can doubt, and we acknowledge the fact that beyond doubt, there could be something which is a knowledge which is not a rational knowledge, but is directing the rationality of our knowledge without us being scared of everything which is rational. العقل وحي داخلي. So your intellect is an inward knowledge. That we are not scared of that. So when I see now some Muslims who are so scared of philosophy, sometimes I want to say, you know what? In a college like this one, you have to reconcile students with philosophy. But not pure abstract philosophy, which is far, because, you know, you have new trends. Analytical philosophy is creating some, you know, this is the way we are dealing with knowledge. You have segregation between knowledge, and you are completely scattered. So you don't have an access. This is an ideology of knowledge. This is a philosophy of knowledge. Scattered everything, there is no access, so there is no meaning. Everything is relative. And we call this postmodernism. And you have to find your way. And I would say that we are accepting some of the conclusion of postmodernism without accepting the premises. It's complicated, what I'm trying to say, but I think that this is why I think that we have to come with a position of confidence in our knowledge and to get the center. At the end of the day, we should not be scared of any kind of knowledge if it doesn't mean that we have found it, but if we are just seeking the access, the center from which we are looking at all this. As Muslim, this is what. So, and at the same time, we have to acknowledge something, we think it's universal. But anyone who is coming from outside our universe of reference is going to say it's relative to what you think. And I accept that what you say, it's that you think it's relative. But we have to be, and I think that this is the way I would put it, that it's something which is essential, fundamentals in our relationship with truth. And at the end, this is what matters. This is what matters, is at the end of the day, knowledge and this reconciliation between very old philosophical tradition that is lost today. If you look at all the contemporary trends in philosophy, there is one word that is missing: truth. And there is one word that we will never miss, that we'll never avoid in our discussion, is truth. At the end of the day, this is the goal. And this is why from the very beginning of being a Muslim is to testify one truth. There is no God by God. And at the end, the spirit of your spiritual journey as Muslim, the word that you are using to say that you are close to God is wal haq. He is the truth. I don't know if you get me here, but yes.
Salam. I'm just going to mention an anecdote about, for the sake of benefit for everyone here, just to, make it more clear the kinds of challenges as students we are facing in the humanities, in the field of humanities in the West. For example, I go to a theological graduate school here in Berkeley, and I'm taking the Islamic spirituality class. And the professor was talking about how Sufism was a movement that began in Basra because of the rampant materialism that was going on. And along with Shi'ism, Sufism emerged as a movement, and a political movement or a ascetic
the way you are putting it is that you don't agree with him, clearly.
Just wait for it. So I was getting increasingly frustrated with the polemics and the categories that were being used, conflating things like asceticism, defiance to materialism, spirituality, tazkiyah, everything all in one lump. And to me, it just raised a couple of red flags, and I just basically, innocently asked the professor, what about the internal sources of tasawwuf in the Quran and the Sunnah, and the purpose of creation, and وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْإِنسَ وَالْجِنَّ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ, and the figure of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam as Khatim Nabiyyin, and the perfect man as a door to finding Allah, basically. And he started laughing at me, and he's like, if I were to teach this course like that, we would finish in half an hour. But this is a Western institution. So he was very much belittling the authenticity of my attempt, and just talking internally about the internal sources, and my reality was belittled as religious, spiritual, your view, And just the way he said was really shocking. It was a wake-up call. And I know that here at Zaytuna, mashallah, the students are quite blessed to be forging this new path, and I wish them a lot of tawfiq. But those of us that are thrust into the existing institutions of these Eurocentric status quo, that's so difficult to forge. We've been facing a lot of barriers, and it's sometimes difficult to navigate those waters on our own. This is all great, what's been said here is very inspiring, but sometimes it's easily to fall flat on your face and being not ridiculed, but not academic enough. So can we find together more substantial tools to navigate these waters, especially when we don't have the luxury of, being with Sheikh Hamza and Imam Zaid and Tariq Ramadan all day long, or have access to you?
I have a question. You heard him saying this, having clearly an outward understanding of what you are experiencing, or the way you understand spirituality from a Muslim viewpoint or an Islamic viewpoint. What should you do, and in which way we have to deal with what he said?
Well, my only reaction was,
no,
I'll write a really good paper, and if he doesn't like it, then, so be it.
How do you know that it was a good one?
Because I'll go through the rigor, the academic rigor of proving my points. Not
your rigor or his?
Well, the universal standard of rigor, that's staying up, staying up all night reading and scratching your head. And I don't know. Is that also subjective? I don't know.
No, the way you are putting it, it's objective. It's the way you think. It's objective. Based on this objective parameter, you think it was a good paper?
Well, I have yet to write it, but
Okay. No, my main question was not about this.
Right,
My main question is, what should we do? What should you do? So I'm not talking about your first reaction. Your first reaction was clearly to be disappointed by what he was saying.
just because it didn't seem like truth. Like,
It doesn't seem like truth.
yeah.
But for him, what you are saying is not at all truth.
No, he said it was true, because he himself is a Muslim. He said, it's true, I can teach it that way, but this is a Western institution.
Okay. My point is, from where you were listening to him,
Yes.
what should you do with what he was saying?
I accept that this is the way it is, and that some people approach knowledge this way, but some of us don't. And I'm not going to condemn him for teaching the class this way, but I say, if I had the opportunity to teach that class, I would teach it very differently.
How?
How? Just more authentically and...
More authentically?
Yeah.
So he was not authentic.
His sources were all referring to these age-old Christian white people telling me what Islam is. So
Okay.
that I resent that. I don't think that is authentic. No.
Okay, you don't think.
Well, I mean, the word choice is just for convenience sake. I'm using these, hurried words. But really, I hope I don't know what you're.
No, but this is very interesting. This discussion is very interesting because
Yeah.
this is exactly at the heart of something that we have to tackle.
See, I guess
You know, when I
that's
wrote
really-
the book, In the Footsteps of the Prophet, I had someone who came to me and said, your book is so great. So I was very happy. He's an unbeliever. This was the first thing, okay? But I read it as a novel. A novel, so it's fiction. Okay, so this is not something that you can teach within academia because this is from within what the Muslims believe.
Yeah.
And this is why you have to ask yourself, within academia, do we teach something which is the so-called objective parameters, or do we accept within academia something which is, this is the belief of the people that we can take their own logic from within? When he's telling you in this, I'm not teaching the inward understanding, I'm teaching the outward understanding of it. And my position on this is, as much as you have to be equipped to know what is coming from within, you should be equally equipped to understand what is said from outside. The true independence is not to say, oh, what you are saying is less authentic than my sources. I would say you are more equipped when you are ready to face the two sources of rational authenticity. Not in order to, and this is where when you are confident, you are ready. Where you are not, you are going to undermine what he is saying, say, that's not authentic, and only my position is right. Why? Because many are scared to be shaken in what they believe because they have an other viewpoint on what is right. It might not be your situation, but I think that this is why I'm asking what you do out of this, in this discussion, when he's saying it's a Western institution.
But isn't there an imbalance when he chooses not to talk about the inward, only the outward? And for all the non-Muslim students in the classroom, it's their right to know both sides of the story.
I completely agree. But the point is that this is where the Western institutions are the Western institutions.
Right.
There is one dimension that you can deal with and say there is something which is missing, is what the people are saying. You know, when Shabir Mansouri, you know him, when he was talking about, he has his son coming from his school. He's in California, by the way, Orange County. He had his son coming and say what he said about Islam in history. And he had this very interesting point is, I'm not going to tell them what we should know about Islam. I'm going to use history to show that there are other viewpoints on history. So it's the history viewed by the Chinese, the Africans. And it's, at the end, there is no objective history. There are viewpoints. And he was added to the Eurocentric understanding to say there are other viewpoints. And in fact, you can decolonize this knowledge by saying there is not only one viewpoint, there are others. So in a college like this one, here, I would say here, there is only one thing that you can do. It's not to give the only viewpoint that we think is right. You're not going to be equipped intellectually outside. You need to get these two, to understand the paradigm, to be able to navigate between the two and say, this is why I think it's right. But on the other side, what you can do in the official academic landscape is to question the truth or the objective truth of what is said. But you can't deny the fact that what he was saying is based on something which is can be perceived, or at least is understood, as authentic from a specific viewpoint. And you can't dismiss the point so easily. You can say something is missing. And by the way, you remember Blaise Pascal, you heard about Blaise Pascal, the philosopher? If you want to convince someone that he might have to look at something from another viewpoint, don't start by telling him you are wrong. You always start, this is the way he was saying as a philosopher, say, you are right from where you are, but it might be that you are wrong from where I look at the thing. So there is always a part of truth in the way the people, and I would tell you something, it's in this kind of dialogue with people who are looking at what you can believe from outside, that they are helping you to come back to a deep understanding of your own. It helps if you take it with confidence, if you are critical. At least this is my perception. I don't know what the other people think about this, but I would say I don't delegitimize at all this viewpoint.
Yeah, but isn't that, again, the heart of postmodern thought? Like, you can just throw out a bunch of things that you understand everything, multiple truths. But what about truth with a capital T? I think we should have more confidence saying, I believe X, you know what I mean?
I'm sorry, I haven't said multiple truths. I said multiple viewpoints. It's not exactly the same, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
But you might have to say something, Bobby. Go ahead.
Well, I
was sure that you had.
I think this is a very, very important discussion, because for me, one of the issues comes down to it is this, that it seems to me that a lot of the what you're saying, and this is not trying to pick on you or anything like that, but I think it's a very important example, comes down to how we understand religion and how we understand Islam as a religion. And the thing is this, that we talk about the criticism of Eurocentrism, but religion itself is a very Eurocentric concept. And I don't just mean that in a very blasé way. But what happens to us is that our understanding of what Islam is now filtered through what we think religion should be. And one of the most pernicious influences on Islam right now is a kind of a Christianization of what Islam should be. In terms of, deeply, this is why when people talk about the question about spirituality, I don't see why his position and your position are actually incompatible. It seems to me there's a very legitimate question to ask historically. How did Muslims become Muslims? Now, when you ask that question in a kind of broader sense, you can say, well, there are lots of complex processes that go on. But at the level of an individual, how you make a decision to be a Muslim, for example, you can say, well, I saw the light. And that's enough. There's no more than that. Or it spoke to me, or something happened. If you look at the sort of stories of the companions, the early companions, how they become Muslims, they don't talk, they simply say they saw something, and something happened to them. God spoke to them in some way. But at the same time, when we say, why are there 1.5 billion Muslims in the world? You can say, well, there are other things which were going on at the same time. That doesn't preclude one from the other. And I think the difficulty is that we tend to spiritualize cultural, social phenomenon, because I think what Tariq is right, is that we're afraid of not being Muslim enough, and the way we demonstrate our Muslimness, our faithness, is by confining our sense to basically the principle of spirituality, etc., rather than seeing Islam as a way of life. A lot of us talk about Islam as a way of life, but we narrow it down to very, very small ritualistic kind of practices and notions of spirituality which are not Islamic in that sense. And the only point I would say, and perhaps this might be worth discussing, I think it's worth us asking what we actually mean when we talk about Islam. There was another question before previously, someone actually said, oh, Islam says this, or in Islam this happens. Now, that could mean a lot of things. Quite often when people say that, they actually kind of mean, well, this is what God has said to me, and this is what I understand exactly. Whereas in fact, what they really mean is that in the community or in the context that I grew up, this is how I learned to be a Muslim, and this is how I learned to express that Muslimness. Which means that that can change. I mean, lots of issues, and then I think this is where history is really, really important for us.
Thank you. No, it was not a question. No, no. Huh? No. These were very good points. I think that I agree with many things. Yeah.
You discussed intellectual colonizing.
Can we revisit that before going on to the next topic?
Okay, go ahead.
No, I just think that just briefly, I think the past the comment was insightful, but I think we can overly generalize when we talk about, we understand Islam as Christians, for example, or a Christianized view of Islam. Christianity and Islam have long histories. So at a certain phase, there might be fundamental things about human existence that the Christians got right. And if we're understanding Islam through that particular prism, then maybe we're reflecting some aspects of Christian theology or thought or epistemology that's very compatible with an Islamic worldview. And so I think definitely history is important, not dichotomizing reality into spiritual or empirical, bring it all together. But I think in doing that, we have to be very careful to really flush out what these terms mean and what we mean when we say them, and not to assume that one is right, one is wrong, just because the labels we put on them might, in our mind or in the mind of the person that we might be discussing these matters with, we assume it means a certain thing. It can mean, it can be very subjective and mean a lot of things to a lot of different people. And I think the comment that precipitated the discussion, that there is a fundamental aspect of our teachings that we can clearly identify in the sources that discuss this interaction between the ruh and the carnal nature of the human being. And one can pull us towards what the Quran identifies as the nafs al-ammara bis-su', that's rooted in our carnal nature, or the nafs mutma'inna, that is more compatible with our spiritual nature. So what does spirit mean? What does ritual mean? What is the interaction between the two? What is the role of ethics in providing an outcome to all of that, ritual and spirituality? So there are a lot of details that I think we have to really flush out and work through before we can make any sort of sweeping endorsements or dismissals of one position or the other, if that makes any sense.
Oh yes, of course. Go ahead.
Can you introduce yourself first, because people don't know?
Yeah, I'm very happy. I'm chairing the discussion. Go ahead. No, that is exactly what I want. Go ahead.
What I wanted to say was this, that I was very quite specific about the Christianization. And what I mean is recently, for example, you'll quite often see books in Muslim bookshops talking about how Darwinism is haram or Darwinism is wrong, etc., etc. And there are problems which are introduced into Islam which really don't have a history within Islamic thought. They become imported as a way of putting things together. Now, it seems to me there are two issues here, and this comes back to the question about what I'm trying to argue here is that let's understand Islam as a kind of a conversation that we have with other Muslims, past, future, and present. And in that sense, there is no kind of way that we can say that there's a certain kind of ethics or there's certain kind of standpoints that come from that. All it comes from is that it's like a language. We learn to speak in a particular language among Muslims that we may or may not share with others. So my point wasn't about Christianity may have certain fundamental issues and certain fundamental compatibilities or not, but it has a very different history. For example, one of the issues I would suggest to you is that we don't have the problem of evil in the same sense as Christian theology did. Not because there was an evil or cruelty, but it was never an issue that we had to explain. We had other kinds of issues, yeah? But more importantly, we don't have the problem created by incarnation, because God never becomes human. The plane of the divine and the human remains separate, so there's never a question that science was in direct competition with reality, etc., or with God. So we don't have to have those kind of conversations. That's just the history of the conversations we've had. Now, we can change those conversations. We can have other kinds of conversations. But it seems to me if we're talking about recovering something about Islam, it's not recovering a particular content, but it's recovering a position and the ability to speak that language and make those kinds of references. What concerns me is this, that we actually become very consolidated about what we mean by being Muslim, and then we turn that into simply a discussion about ethics and spirituality, rather than taking the sense that, for me, one way of understanding Islam is the community that begins with the archangel speaking to the prophet, and we then trace ourselves from those conversations. And that opens up all kinds of things that we can talk about. That's why I don't think there is an Islamicization, and I agree with you, Tariq, about knowledge, etc., because what that would mean is just putting an imprint on that. Islam must be something that we talk about and we use certain kind of metaphors for it. So I don't think there is an issue about that Christianity. We may agree with certain aspects of Christianity, we may disagree with certain aspects. We can learn to have these conversations, but we recognize that our metaphors that we understand things go through a very different, they may go from a very different kind of connections, and we make certain associations which may or may not be relevant. And I think that's what I was trying to say. So it's not a question about dichotomizing, but actually recognizing maybe the one way of thinking about Islam is a language that we all speak.
So, you want to say something? Are you sure? No. Sure? Okay.
This is Professor Salman Sayed. He's visiting us from Australia. So, welcome him, inshallah. He's heading an Islamic center in Australia, and he'll be participating in the Islamophobia conference. So, welcome.
So, the mic, where is the mic?
Mine is not seem as sophisticated as Dr. Salman's, but you discussed intellectual colonization, and some of my thoughts this in academia you have this dichotomy between things that are relegated to the spirit and things that are relegated to the mind, and how you can't merge between the two. And so many Muslims will engage with academia, accepting this premise, and so they'll view academia as being a poison to the spirit and a poison to their own pursuit of truth and becoming closer with God. But I just wanted to hear you maybe share some of your thoughts about, you talk about liberation, and so part of what I see as liberation is using this things that are studied in academia as a catalyst to enhancing your own spirituality. And I don't think that that's something, and I think that is something that is achieved by having more confidence in the tradition and more confidence in your own approach to knowledge. And Imam Al-Ghazali discusses in Al-Munqidh min al-Dalal, his deliverance from error, he discusses that he saw all these different intellectual avenues. He went through all these different intellectual paths trying to drive an ultimate truth or have a certainty in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in the end he discusses that the spirit, the ruh, is in itself something that can be used to derive truth. It's something that is an epistemology and not just the intellect. And so I was wondering, how can we, as Muslims and engaging in academia and against this force that wants to divorce spirituality from intellectual thought, how does one use the spirit as a source of knowledge and further promoting or having like a confident approach to academic discourse?
It's this one is you are thinking it's not as it's a deep one. It's a very deep one, and you know, if I have to speak about experiences that I have been reading about, you know, with scholars and in history, and my own experience, if I have to try to just get a sense of how can we deal with this, you know, if you only deal, and this is why I think that still we are dealing with something which is truth, which is belief, which is something which is deep down, that you think it's really, you are reconciling your being with the essential truth when it comes to the very essence of this meaning of life, you know, the meaning of life being this. So I think that this is where, you know, it's not, it's when you have the verse that I was, you know, when you have the verse and you look at the history of the revelation, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calling the Prophet ﷺ, and when he is calling him, he's telling him, look at the world and come back to your heart. You know, the last chapters, they are very much talking about nature, al-qamar, wal-fajr, wal-duha, and you have a verse that is telling you this, something which is very important, which is connected this. سَنُرِيهِمْ آيَاتِنَا فِي الْآفَاقِ وَفِي أَنفُسِهِمْ حَتَّى يَتَبَيَّنَ لَهُمْ أَنَّهُ الْحَقِّ. The relationship with truth is through the signs that are bearing meaning coming back to you. And this is the starting point of the way you look at the world. I have no problem, you know, and this is why I think that there are principles and there is a fundamental truth. And in fact, the starting point for us, the fundamental truth is a tawheed. And a tawheed means exactly what was said, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. So meaning by this that our starting point is not only there is a truth, but we have a relationship with truth, which is to acknowledge the fact that he is here, and going deeper than that, because the very essence of truth is not only to acknowledge that God is here, is to love him. It's something which has to do to come close, to know, and to love. This is why the spiritual path is about ma'rifatullah. Al-ma'rifah has to do with the knowledge. And loving, in kuntum tuhibbun Allah, it's just the way you love him, which is the closeness. And this is why you have to respond to a call. So our relationship to truth is not only that we seek truth, that truth is calling us. Why I'm saying this? Because يا أيها الذين آمنوا استجيبوا لله وللرسول إذا دعاكم, the two of them, to what gives you life. دعاكم لما يحييكم واعلموا أن الله يحول بين المرء وقلبه. The knowledge of God is between you and your heart. And come to another thing. It's a dimension where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you about something which is important that you cannot get in all the rationalist philosophical trend. لهم قلوب لا يعقلون بها. Connecting يعقلون, the verb that is connected to al-aql, the intellect, and you have heart that are not understanding. And then فإنها لا تعمل الأبصار ولكن تعمل القلوب التي في الصدور. So you are not blind out of your eyes, the physical dimension, you are blind out of, and blindness is what? Is the veil that is which is preventing you from seeing the truth. And what is kufr? Kufr is what? What is a sound heart? A sound heart is connected to God. في قلوبهم مرض means this sickness is the veil, and al-kufr is a veiled heart. If you get that, is really where we can't just, come, and this is why I would agree, I'm not sure that we agree on the fundamentals with what was said, but this is why I think we have to be very cautious in our understanding of our relationship with knowledge and rationality, that you don't miss the first point. This is why in all the interface dialogue, when I'm saying to people, please, with the West or with all the scientific settings, don't start a dialogue at the periphery of our understanding. The starting point of our discussion should be from the center. And the center is two things. The concept of human being is essential. Because this is the way we are going to connect this concept of human being with truth, and this truth with what are the sources of truth in your being, from where it comes to you. Because it comes from your heart, it comes from your mind, and it comes from a way of life. So the ethical dimension is how the three dimensions are helping each other just to come to the center. So this is why you are always connecting, and be careful, we are not only connecting our belief with rituals, we are connecting our being close to God by understanding that something that the basic psychology now is telling us. الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, so you believe, and doing good deeds, but not only in that direction. The good deeds have an impact on your heart. So action has an impact on truth. You understand? So even scientific knowledge has an action on truth. So if when you come from the center here, equipped with this, which is exactly what he was saying, and by the way, Al-Munqidh min al-Dalal is the book that Descartes read, and he wrote on the margin. So the whole discussion about doubt and rationalism is something that we know, it's also in our tradition. But the difference when he was talking about the spirit, when he was talking about this light, the heart is a source of light, which is helping you to go beyond blindness, truth, and understanding. When I'm saying this is we need to get equipped with this, and to be able with this to keep the center and to interact with all the other viewpoints that we may find. So this kind of confidence, this kind of, and understanding something which is important here, that at any moment, our heart can be shaken. رَبَّنَا لَا تُزِغْ قُلُوبَنَا بَعْدَ إِذْ هَدَيْتَنَا. It's coming, al-huda, it's coming from this relationship. And it can come from everything. And this is where this is attacks coming from outside. And it's not only an act of war. You can be attacked by your own rationality. So it's a personal jihad. But you are going to win the jihad if you are confident. أحسب الناس أن يتركوا أن يقولوا آمنا وهم لا يفتنون. When we read the verse, it's saying, do you think it's going to enough to say, I believe, and you are not going to be tested? You are going to be tested by your rationality and the other views on your own answer. That's a test. You are going to win it. You are going to struggle. This is an intellectual jihad. لا تطيع الكافرين وجاهدهم به بالقرآن جهادا كبيرا. It's the first is an intellectual jihad, and you are at the center of that. But the point is not by denying the existence and denying the legitimacy of the people who are questioning you. And this is why it's not to oppose to knowledge, it's to understand that some knowledges are at the periphery, some knowledges are not at the same level. You should never be scared by knowing history when you are dealing with belief, because these are not the same thing. And if someone is telling you, and this is why, if someone is telling you, yes, that's true in Basra, they came back to more spirituality because they were facing, you know, and this is exactly Abu Darda when he was against, you know, Abu Dhar, when he was facing, you know, people liking, you know, they were starting to like power and luxury. He was facing them in a way. It was because history is like this. We should remember that we need to deal with history, and the fitan in history started straight after the Prophet ﷺ was passed away. Straight after, it started to be a problem. We are dealing with human beings, so we need to get this history, not to be scared. This is not to prove that what we believe is wrong. It proves that human beings are human beings. That's it. Human beings are human beings. You have to deal with them. So it has to come back to the center and to say this is not touching the center. It's a kind of intellectual jihad helping me to be stronger with the way I'm dealing with this. And this is where here it's a deep challenge for an institution when you want to deal with all these dimensions as Muslims who are teaching how to be confident with your heart and open with your mind. But confident with your heart. Confident with your heart is a very difficult thing. Is anyone, any father, any mother, we know how much it's difficult to do this. And if you have an institution, an academic institution, within academia, very often you say, don't speak about this. I think that's completely wrong. Any institution which is not talking about love, affection, feeling good, is not really an institution. It's dehumanized. It's dehumanized because we know that we learn better when we talk about all this, when we feel good. And as Muslims, we have to get the center. This center, it's important. And to be equipped. And please don't forget, in the field of knowledge, when you are getting a degree or getting a PhD, you are dealing with power struggle. Power struggle. A degree is saying something about, and your credential. And if you worship God, you know that it's only a title. If you worship knowledge, you are very pleased with the title. And it's shirk. And the most dangerous shirk is a shirk al-khafi. So you're in danger. You get my point? So I was just turning around the center. Allahu alam.
As Muslims in the West and more, if we work in the science side, I'm studying mathematics, how do we deal with atheists? Because sometimes we have debates about topics such as homosexuality, evolution, etc., and we know the truth, but how do we convince them if we don't have scientific demonstrations, or we don't know them from the Quran, or the sufficient arguments to answer them? Where is the limit for the conversation?
Wow. First, I don't get the relationship between mathematics and homosexuality.
Just saying she's a math student. She's a student of math.
Okay, and not equipped to respond to some of the question when it comes to spirit. Yes, okay. Once again, as Muslims, and once again, there is a tradition and there are principles, and this is where I think that not everything is relative in our understanding of our principles. So I would say that first, anyone who has to tackle this, the best is to keep quiet if you don't have an answer, and just to go and to learn more about your own tradition, because you are involved here in things that are quite difficult. Why I'm saying this is that we have to be difficult when we talk in the West with people who are questioning us about themselves sometimes. And I'm following now, and I'm in touch with many brothers and sisters who are experiencing this. And when you talk to them, what they are expecting from you is not a judgment by saying it's haram and you are going to be condemned. They want understanding. They might understand that you don't agree with what they are doing, but they don't want you to be judgmental about who they are because you put them outside. And I think that this is quite important to get it right, that we are not coming with a book that you are open. It's written in my book, haram. So I'm sorry, haram. And that's it. This is the very simple answer, but we are dealing with very deep problems and suffering and questions. When someone is coming to you, you know, someone converted to Islam, he is now 39 years old, and he comes to me and says, I converted to Islam, and I have this problem, and it's natural. I was born like this, and I'm getting Muslims telling me that I'm condemned. So I came by the will of God to Islam, and I have Muslims telling me, we are sorry. And then you come and you can just do something which is here saying just the rule, it's haram in Islam, and that's it. And this is why I think my position on these things is I'm not going to play with the tradition to say something is halal when it's haram. But we have to take it clearly from when it comes to some of the behavior of the people, why in some society it has been normalized, why and how it's now put, and some people are men or women are experiencing this, is to make the difference between the ruling and in which way you deal with human beings. That I'm listening, I can understand your suffering, and still for us there is a divine project for humanity, and it's a man for a woman and a woman for a man. This is what we think, which is the reality. But the divine project cannot put us in a situation when we transform ourselves into a court and we decide who we condemn. We judge the action, we don't judge the being. No one can do this. And especially, you know, in Muslim majority countries, very often, because we are, you know, it's the majority, very often the people are like this, they are very judgmental. Even though when you hear stories in Muslim majority countries about this that are very worrying about what is really happening on the ground. So we should not pretend. And especially here in California, you should look at the situation, and when it comes to this, know what Islam is saying, and know what it means to have a human being, a human behavior that is listening to the people. You can just know the rules, understand the rules, set the limits, but in no way in this society you should stop listening, talking, and going along people. As long as they want to talk to you and they want to listen from you, I think that you have to be part in the process of being there, listening, talking. And at one point, it's not for you to have the final judgment. It's not for you to have the final judgment on people. So once again, be careful in our attitude, and very often to show that we are very strict and good Muslims, we think that the good Muslims is showing the fact that he's a good Muslim by the strictness of his or her judgment. No, the good Muslim is not the one who is sharp in judging, but he is patient in listening, which is completely different. And I would say that this is where I would put things. But once again, I'm not playing with the limits. I'm not playing with the rule. I'm just asking the people, be careful. You know, it's too difficult. Some people are going through things that are very, very difficult in their life. And we come here with our very formal judgment, and we put people within and we put people outside. No, it might be, I don't agree with what you are doing. Now I'm here respecting who you are and trying to understand. And I can tell you that people, Muslims, practicing Muslims, people who are praying with you in mosques, they will never talk. They are suffering in silence, not because they are judged by Allah, but they are judged by us. They don't get people listening to them. They don't get empathy. They don't get rahmah. It's as simple as this. So you can come here and say, you know what, spirituality, we pray during the night. There are some people, they are so much praying during the night with such a love to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They come during the day and there is no rahmah for the ibad. I don't know. I think that if you pray just to get this relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala during the night, is during the day just some ruhama baynahum. Ruhama baynahum. And even ruhama baynahum is not only, you know, be careful. Ashidda ala al-kuffar meant in the verse that the people who are attacking you and say, I'm not going to let you. I'm going to fight for my rights. That's fine. But the great majority of the people that some Muslim scholars are saying they are all kuffar, be careful. Some people, they don't even know what they are denying. They didn't even know what it means to have a relationship with truth. I have people in my family today say, I never heard my parents speaking about God and ethics. I don't know what it means. I didn't know. So I learned from the very beginning. And we come and we are judgmental about people and say, Kufar. No, I'm sorry. Kufar is someone who knows the truth and denied the reality of it. So it's an intellectual opposition to truth. The great majority, they don't even know that. So we have to be very cautious with our judgment. I think that this is part of, and this is what has to be taught here in any Islamic institution. It's not only in mosque. It's an intellectual state of mind in which way we talk about people, we understand the world. You know, to get knowledge is also to set judgments. So there is no knowledge without judgment. By definition, when you know, you start judging things. So this is where, as spiritual being, you need to be very cautious with your judgments. Allahu Alam, this is at least the way I would. Allahu Alam.
Assalamu alaikum. My question was in relation to your use of the term information colonization. How can we escape information colonization? Do we not always have to settle to one side of the discussion, or is there a way to amalgamate all the views into one nation?
Information and colonization. I use the two words.
The colonization of knowledge.
Ah, yes. But why are you connecting these to information?
Well, knowledge can be information.
Ah, in that, okay, that way. No, you know, look, the starting point when it comes to knowledge, it's always to remember, and it's you know, it's an intellectual state of mind. It's a mindset. It's to be aware that when you deal with knowledge, and whoever is your teacher, whoever is the professor or the people who are teaching on the books that you are reading, you need to keep in mind from behind your intellect that you need to get to remember that there are sources of knowledge. There is the content and the paradigm, the whole philosophy of knowledge within which this is going to be put, and then the objectives. Why? Okay, and I think that this is only something that we are not always sure about it, and we are not always aware, and we don't always know in which way we have to deal with it. But you have to get this critical thinking, which is, okay, where does it come from? Why is it put like that? And you have to question not only the knowledge, but the way the knowledge is put, is constructed. And through the knowledge is also something which is connected to this, which is perceptions. You know, all the work of Edward Said on Orientalism is mainly about creating the others through the perception, but the perception is not void. The perception is a power struggle, is that you create the other in order to dominate or to distance yourself. And sometimes it helps you to define yourself. All this business about Islamophobia is telling much more about who is nurturing it than about us. Because by creating the other, you define yourself. You become the unifying factor for a society that has no center when it comes to identity. When you deal with what is happening in Europe, when you deal with what's happening here, they say, okay, you are creating the other to come with something which is so it has to do with knowledge here. How do you know the other? How do you construct the other, and how do you use your knowledge? So there is a source, there is a paradigm that you have to question, and there are objectives. My main point: you are not always sure, but you should always be aware that this could happen. But by the way, you also have to do this with your Muslim scholars. Why? Because there is no Muslim scholar, so you can agree on the fundamental. But the way a Muslim scholar is going to prioritize, to look at the culture, the way he is going to talk about the surrounding society. I can't have the same viewpoint as Imam Zaid Shakir. We don't have the same story. We are not coming. I'm coming from Egypt, and I was born and raised in my society. And it's clear, if you listen, if you analyze what I'm saying, that there is a lot about my history in the way I deal with my principles. And at least of course. So I'm trying to get to something which is the essence, but I have to be humble enough to understand that I am not getting the essence without going through my own life, my own history. So when you listen, sometimes you have to be careful, because some people think, oh, it's good when we are dealing in the West to deal with the scholars that are convert, because they deal with the society in a way which is from within. And it's right. The Muslim scholars who are converted to Islam can give you from within. They have an understanding. But it might be that their understanding of the tradition that is coming from there could be also through a specific window. So you should take the two in order to understand that it might be that here I need to get another viewpoint in the way I deal with the scriptural sources. And this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there is no incarnation, but there are texts. And texts, you always read them from a specific viewpoint. Except for us, al-ma'loom min ad-din bid-darura. Meaning that there are fundamentals on which we agree. Now, in anything which has to do with al-masalih, the understanding of masalih, it has to do with sensitivity. It has to do with many different dimensions. And this is why you yourself, without knowing it, sometimes you listen to a scholar and you are attracted by him or her because, yes, there is something in the non-verbal communication which is touching you. And this is knowledge, but it's coming from somewhere. So you can't just look at it and just be careful. We have to be careful. This institution is equipping you. I hope that you are going to be equipped against anything which is to follow charismatic leaders. Because you know the problem of charismatic leaders is their charisma. You understand what I mean? It's very important. We are not following scholars based on emotional attraction. We have to be intellectually equipped and to get it right. So in an institution within academia, we are helping our students to be equipped to go beyond the charisma. There is nothing wrong with this, if and only if you are able to question the power and the credential of anyone who is charismatic beyond his charisma. And you should be able to do this. And the best example are the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. Because they were going to him and asking him questions, questioning his humanity while following the fact that he was the messenger. No question about the revelation, but question about you. And you have this story about Ghazwat Badr. So I think that you have also to be equipped with your teachers and also the people you are following. We need a community of brothers and sisters who are decolonized by this, interferences that we may have in our way of dealing in the West, but also from within the community, from within our. I kept on repeating. I know that some don't agree with me, but I think that we have a very deep crisis of authority in Islam. And the authority is not because we don't have a pope, it's not because we don't have a church, it's because we don't have enough independent minds. The problem is the way we give credibility to some people, it's because there is a lack of confidence in our own power, in our own, in fact, intellectual responsibility to you know, power or a scholar should be able to give you answers. And as I was saying yesterday, you should be confident enough to understand that you have the power to ask the right questions. Any Muslim college or Islamic institution who is not giving the students the confidence to ask the right questions is missing the point. Because the right question is questioning the authority of the one that you are following. Look at what is happening. Look at what is happening today in the Muslim majority countries and in the world. Who are the people who are followed? In which way we follow people? It's very much about the charisma, the authority. One, we follow, we like him, we like her. That's not this. Islam is not about that. It's not about that. It's really about much deeper understanding. And this is why, you know, very often in the discussion that I have with some Muslims, I'm just trying to be critical and to give them the means and the instruments to be themselves critical towards what they are listening to, because it's dangerous. The kind of following that we have in our Muslim community today, it's a problem. And if we want to be effective in the West, we really have to think about that. So this is why, for example, when you know, we're talking about, you know, a college and institution, what we are saying, we have been talking about this for years now, institutionalizing our presence in the West means institutions that are giving this autonomy, this independence, this critical thinking to sisters and brothers in our community to be able to go along. And the way this is the very meaning of education. To educate someone is I'm going along with you till a certain point, and at one point I stop and you go alone. I walk with you, but then you are going to walk alone. Ask yourself now, are you autonomous in the intellectually speaking in the way? So this is why, for example, the question about, you know, I'm teaching or studying mathematics and I'm asked about homosexuality, it's not my field. So you find yourself having handicap or disabled, intellectually speaking, because you are not equipped, and this is why we need some scholars. We need the brothers and sisters to have this basic knowledge. Wallahu a'lam. It's okay?
We're just going to conclude. Jazakumullah khair, Professor Tariq Ramadan, for this engaging discussion and dialogue with the students. So hopefully this will be many of the opportunities in the future. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Zaytuna College is investing in a new home in Berkeley, California. Join us on April 28th for a benefit dinner featuring Zaid Shakir, Hamza Yusuf, and Hatem Bazian, and find out how you can dedicate a brick to be permanently displayed at the new campus. Register today